You've become a bottleneck, Harper. That's what Chase Ryland, our newly anointed CTO with Silicon Valley veneers and podcast charisma, told me. Not in a one-on-one meeting, of course. That would require backbone. No. He slid it into a slide deck during our weekly Culture and Coffee town hall, which was mostly just a ritualized backpat session for upper management. He smiled while calling my 5 years of foundational code legacy scaffolding. Then smiled even harder, pitching his own name-brand refactor as a game-changer. Meanwhile, my code, was silently holding up the entire framework of our $50 million flagship product, Calyx. It was the kind of infrastructure that doesn't show off, just works, like a heartbeat. And he, Chase, revved around the office like a Tesla on borrowed voltage. Let me back up. The day started the way most did, with me alone in the Denver office at 5:38 a.m., the only soul on the engineering floor besides the cleaning staff. Harper Lynn, Principal Systems Architect, Keeper of Undocumented Miracles. Ghost in the Jenkins pipeline. I'd written 91% of the Calyx core modules, not contributed, authored, from scratch. Every deployable microservice, every optimization loop. When they said, "It just works," it was because I made it that way. I was the one patching vulnerabilities at 2 a.m., tracking dependency rot, building caching layers that nobody saw but everyone benefited from. And then there's Chase, imported from some failed mobility startup, now masquerading as the visionary who could modernize our stack. He walked in on month 2 and started treating my work like scaffolding in a building he'd just bought. His first slide deck didn't even include my name, just Team Calyx and his initials at the footer, like he hand-welded the APIs himself. That same morning, while sorting through deployment reports and sipping stale yerba mate, I got a renewal ping from the licensing registry I'd set up years ago, the same platform I used to contribute my code under a very specific clause. All commercial use is void upon termination without cause. It was a clause no one noticed, or they assumed they'd never need to. I renewed it, quietly. Just a date change, and one added line referencing new modules I'd built last week. Then I pulled up my internal exit checklist, typed out a short resignation, committed one final update under my namespace, and hit send. No fireworks, no speeches, just a quiet whisper to myself. You planted the fuse, just in case. See, Chase didn't know me. Not really. He saw quiet and translated it as soft. But silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means you're listening more carefully than anyone else, and I was. His playbook was obvious. Within a week, devs I mentored were moved to vague-sounding squads like Velocity Core and Rapid Ops. My Jira tickets disappeared. My comments in the repo were reworded and tagged Ryland Reviewed. He even walked up to me in the micro kitchen once, chewing a protein bar like it was a leadership accessory, and said, "Harper, I think it's time we start coding like entrepreneurs, not monks." I looked him dead in the eye. Speed without integrity is just a shortcut to failure. He blinked, smiled, probably queued up a comeback from his internal buzzword Rolodex. But I didn't stick around to hear it. That night, I messaged an old friend, Quinn, now a corporate litigator out in Palo Alto. Just hypotheticals. What happens if a company continues using licensed code after terminating the contributor without cause? The reply came fast. They're in breach. And if the code's critical, they're on fire. I didn't reply. I just stared out the window, past the parking garage full of lease-bought Teslas and inflated egos. Because I knew Chase would do it. He'd fire me, and he'd do it thinking he was being strategic, not realizing he was about to flip the wrong switch. 2 days later, I walked by Conference Room B and heard my name. Not whispered, not cursed, just dismissed. She's solid, Chase was saying, his voice full of TED Talk charm and none of the substance. But Calyx needs acceleration, not stability. She's legacy code in a rocket era. Legacy. Like I was a paperback novel in his Kindle empire. I paused, listened. To Chase, anything he didn't author was either obsolete or his for the taking. That was his entire philosophy in one sentence. Steal the house, then repaint it and pretend you built the bricks. Later that afternoon, my admin credentials vanished. No Slack notification, no polite looping you out, just locked out. Like I'd never been in. My Git access was read only. Features I'd architected were suddenly labeled Ryland Prototype in Confluence. The new engineers, mostly handpicked from Chase's old firm, started gutting my modules like scavengers on a buffet line. One junior dev even had the nerve to ask how HLin's throttling script handled concurrent API bursts. I looked him dead in the eyes and gave the answer in binary. Took him the rest of the day to decode it. Welcome to my world. The thing is, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was watching. You don't scream when the walls close in. You measure the distance between the ceiling and your next breath. You wait for gravity. Soon after, my Slack profile pic, once a quiet selfie of me holding a mug that said "Build it better," was swapped out for the generic gray silhouette. No one admitted to it. Glitch, they said. Right, just like spilling your ex's name at your wedding is a glitch. Then came the all hands. Chase, with his sleeves rolled up for maximum bro CEO appeal, stood before the engineering org and declared, Calyx is now fully integrated into our unified product pipeline. All proprietary components are officially company property. Proprietary components. He even said it with a straight face, as if the words company property could magically erase authorship, ownership, or contract clauses. I didn't say a word, just stared, listening to my silence settle like dust in a tomb. Later that night, I reopened my Signal thread with Quinn. Our last message sat there like a loaded weapon. I typed, "They're calling it company property now. I think I'm getting the axe." She replied instantly, "If they terminate without cause and use the code, they're in breach." Even if it's just restructuring? I asked. Still counts, especially if they deploy it commercially. Did they ever read the license? She paused. Then, Harper, does it matter? I stared at those 4 words. No, it didn't, because people like Chase Ryland don't read. They skim. They bluff. They assume no one will challenge them, especially not the quiet woman with the dark-rimmed glasses and the ancient ThinkPad. But I wasn't bluffing. That week, I was removed from the QA rollout for the Calyx launch. My badge flashed red at the elevator. HR started circling like vultures looking for a polite time to peck. Then, Friday morning, the calendar invite came. Quarterly realignment review. No context, no agenda. Just 10 o'clock a.m., Chase Ryland and Maya from HR. I arrived early, because I always do. Maya was already seated, her smile overly rehearsed, fingers twitching over her MacBook. Chase walked in with his usual swagger, holding a cup of black coffee. No coaster, no care. He didn't sit. "Harper," he began, like we were about to co-host a cooking show. "Let's keep this simple. Investors want us lean, agile, focused." Maya nodded like her job depended on it. It probably did. She slid a manila folder across the table. I opened it. A 1-pager. Already signed. Already dated. Restructured due to evolving organizational priorities. That was it. 5 years. 5 million lines of code. 1 generic sentence and a severance agreement that looked generous, if you didn't know how much Calyx was about to generate. Chase extended his hand like a benevolent villain. "No hard feelings, right? The train's moving, with or without you." I shook it. "Wouldn't want to slow the train down. I said. But here's the thing, Chase. I built the tracks. And now, I just flipped the switch. I walked out of that room with the folder tucked under one arm and the future clicking into place behind my eyes like a well-lubricated lock. There was no rage, no dramatic hallway confrontation, just the low, steady hum of inevitability. I didn't go home. I went back to my desk, well, what used to be my desk, and logged into my Proton mail. Drafted a clean, simple email addressed to 3 parties: legal@ospreytech.com, compliance@ospreytech.com, CTO@ospreytech.com. Subject line: License breach notification. Attachments: Contributor Agreement 8. Lin signed. PDF module/ownership/map. Changelog final.md. And in the body, just 3 sentences. As per Section 4B, Subclause 2 of my contributor agreement, any commercial use of licensed modules is void upon termination without cause. The agreement remains in full effect and was renewed on last week's date. Continued deployment constitutes unlicensed use. I scheduled the email to autosend at 12:01 a.m., precisely 1 minute after my severance cleared. Then I closed my laptop and walked out, calm, detached, like a surgeon scrubbing out after a long operation. Because that's the thing about engineers like me. We don't throw tantrums. We write fail-safes. And Calix? Calix had one. The launch was scheduled for Monday, 9:00 a.m. Pacific. Chase strutted onto a morning Bloomberg Tech segment like he'd single-handedly coded the thing from a garage in Palo Alto. Wore a startup hoodie with a tiny Osprey Tech logo stitched into the collar like a badge of honor. "We're proud to roll out a fully modular cloud-native logistics solution," he said, voice syrupy with confidence. No mention of me, no mention of the team. Just we. The kind of we that meant me and the people I haven't fired yet. I didn't watch the interview live. I was curled up on my couch in a hoodie that still smelled like old debugging sessions, sipping matcha from a chipped mug that read, "I void warranties." My phone buzzed. Messages from ex-colleagues, mostly those who'd gone radio silent after my quiet restructuring. I didn't read them. I opened LinkedIn instead. Updated my headline, Harper Lin, Systems Architect. Available for license verification and compliance consulting. No big resume dump, no drama, just that. By noon, my profile views spiked. 12, then 34, then over 90. Titles like General Counsel, VP of Engineering, and Enterprise Risk Strategist started showing up. Then the ping came from someone still inside Osprey. No words, just a screenshot of a Slack thread in Calix deploy. Anyone know why the Gateway API is throwing license-expired errors? I didn't need context. They'd launched Calix without revalidating contributor licenses. Why would they? Chase had said it himself. Company property. But code doesn't run on assumptions. It runs on truth. The first error reports were quiet, some authentication issues, a few timeout errors. Then access denials in the load balancer, token invalidation, missing dependency triggers. By 3:20 p.m., someone rebooted the core container stack. 3 times. Didn't help. Chase, ever the showman, sent out a company-wide email. "We're experiencing expected teething issues. A sign of rapid scale. Let's show resilience." Sure, Chase. Resilience is what you call it when you walk into a buzzsaw and call it a haircut. Meanwhile, my email, the one with the subject line, License Breach Notification, was still unopened. Still sitting in their inbox like a bomb with no beeping. It wouldn't stay that way for long. The email was finally opened on Tuesday morning at 9:07 a.m. I know because my lawyer's red receipt pinged instantly. 30 seconds later, the general counsel forwarded it to 5 departments with a single word in the subject line, urgent. Inside the thread, Quinn, always precise, had included the full signed contributor agreement, a changelog with timestamps, the termination clause in plain legal English, and one final sentence that made even seasoned CFOs sweat bullets. Continued commercial use of the Calyx modules constitutes material breach and exposes Osprey Tech to significant liability. By 9:22 a.m., the head of compliance canceled their 10 a.m. all hands and called a fire drill instead. Not the kind where you exit the building, the kind where you realize the building's on fire and the sprinklers are rigged with gasoline. Rollouts were frozen, hotfixes halted, new client integrations paused. Every line of code tied to Calyx was placed under review. Legal scrambled to understand which modules were still legally deployable. The answer, of course, was none. By 11 o'clock a.m., E3 account managers had flagged outages with key enterprise clients. One of them, a federal freight contractor, reportedly shouted, "If this isn't patched by tonight, we're bringing in auditors." And Chase? According to a leak from a product manager I'd mentored years ago, Chase smirked during a strategy sync that same afternoon. "She's bluffing," he said. "Contributor licenses like that don't hold up. We own Calyx." He even made air quotes around own. He told legal to sit tight, told engineering to patch around the modules. Like you can duct tape over a black hole. Problem was, it wasn't just my modules. The authentication engine? Mine. Scheduling logic? Mine. Elastic load balancer logic? Also mine. I hadn't built the accessories. I'd built the spine. And they'd severed it. At 2:47 p.m., Quinn received the first response from their legal team. It was shaky, hesitant, a half-composed request. Would Ms. Lin be open to assisting in resolving this matter amicably without escalation? We didn't respond, because there was no escalation. There was just gravity, and gravity had already been triggered. By 5 p.m., the board had been alerted, not by Chase, but by 3 of their biggest clients, each of whom had sent demand letters directly to the board's inbox. One of them read, "If you knowingly deployed unlicensed software, this is fraud, not just negligence." By that evening, Chase's name stopped appearing in internal Slack channels. His calendar events were quietly reassigned. PR posted a vague tweet about unexpected infrastructure latency. No one bought it. The next morning, my LinkedIn inbox lit up. One recruiter message stood out. "Harper, your name came up repeatedly in our leadership meeting. Would you be open to a discreet consulting engagement, helping stabilize a logistics platform recently impacted by, let's say, industry disruption? Flexible terms. Full respect." But that wasn't the only email. At 6:04 p.m., an official message from Osprey Tech's interim legal team hit my inbox. Subject: Immediate consulting opportunity CC'd. CTO, CEO, Head of Compliance. All names I didn't recognize. It read like corporate cologne, desperate and over-applied. "Ms. Lin, we understand recent events have caused complications with respect to Calyx deployment. We'd like to formally invite you to return in a temporary capacity to assist in resolving compliance matters. Full consulting rates. Indemnity guaranteed. Your discretion is appreciated." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I wasn't angry. I wasn't even vindicated. I was simply done. That same night, word started leaking. Chase Ryland, suspended pending investigation. The internal memo was careful, all pending outcomes and internal reviews. But the subtext was a siren. His Slack account was deactivated, his badge revoked. By morning, his LinkedIn quietly updated to "Open to work." It was the digital equivalent of exile. They say people don't fall from grace. They free fall. And when they hit the bottom, the silence afterward isn't peace. It's amnesia. Everyone pretending they never knew him. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a one-room studio above a used bookstore in Boulder, sipping jasmine tea from a clay mug and watching the sun stretch lazy shadows across my desk. No espresso machines, no sliding glass doors, just a single window and a chair that didn't squeak. And for the first time in years, the code I wrote bore my name. Legally, publicly. I'd taken a consulting gig with a rival logistics startup. Not for revenge, not for the money, for the clean slate. My only terms? Full authorship of any module I wrote. Final control over licensing. No corporate interference in my dev cycles. They agreed within the hour. Week 2, I named the platform Ember. Something sturdy, warm, and built from ashes. Not flashy, not viral, just reliable. We shipped the beta by the end of the month. 2 of Osprey Tech's former clients signed NDAs to test it within days. Reputation travels faster than marketing ever will. Then, 3 weeks later, it arrived. An envelope. Cream-colored. Heavy. No return address. Inside, a final royalty check. For a minor compression algorithm I'd patented years before Calyx was even a sketch on a whiteboard. Not life-changing money, but a full circle. I deposited it, then sent the full amount, to the penny, to a nonprofit that mentors young girls in STEM, especially the ones told they're not leader material or too quiet for tech. The note I included simply read, "Let them write their own licenses. No speeches, no press releases, just action." A few days later, the quiet retraction began. Osprey Tech didn't post about it. No apology, no public statement, just a subtle deletion of the Calyx product page. Installer links returned 404s. Support documentation vanished, erased. One of my old QA leads sent me a 2-word message with no subject line. It's pulled, and that was it. They couldn't fix it, couldn't untangle the breach. So they did what weak companies always do when cornered by their own arrogance. They buried it. Within the week, the CEO stepped down to explore new opportunities, which, in executive speak, means the board lit the floor under my loafers. Chase was gone. Bio scrubbed. Twitter deactivated. LinkedIn dormant. It was as if he never existed, except for the lessons. Rumor had it he'd moved overseas, pivoted into AI ethics, which is either a redemption arc or a punchline, depending on how cynical you are. Me? I wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. I was building something better. Weeks passed. The dust settled, but the silence held. Not the awkward kind, the heavy kind, the kind that follows collapse. Then one morning, soft sunlight cutting across my work table, succulents catching dew on their plump little leaves, I got the notification. Breaking. Osprey Tech issues full recall of Calyx platform due to invalid licensing. Estimated losses, 50 millimeters, and climbing. No dramatic headline font. No image of Chase with his arms crossed in triumph. Just a grayscale stock photo of a data center and the sinking tone of corporate damage control. I scrolled to the middle of the article. There it was. We underestimated one line of code, and the woman who wrote it. Interim CTO, Osprey Tech. I stared at that quote for a long time. Not because it felt good. Not because it was vindication. Because it was inevitable. They had waited too long. They had underestimated silence. They had assumed the kill switch was a bluff. That I was a bluff. But I wasn't. I wasn't a variable in their formula. I was the compiler. I didn't share the article, didn't tweet a victory lap. I just sat down, opened my laptop, and navigated 4 layers deep into a folder labeled contingency. Inside, one last compressed zip, compliant timestamped final.zip. I highlighted it, right-clicked, archive. I smiled. Not a wide grin, not malicious, just a quiet nod. I didn't need the file anymore, because the proof was already out there. I didn't need to shout. The The silence had done the shouting for me. Later that week, I received one last message. It came from a freelance reporter who had written a deep dive for Tech Audit Weekly. She thanked me, not for leaking anything, I hadn't, but for what she called setting a precedent in a world built on stolen labor. I never responded, because I wasn't building a story. I was building rules, real ones. By the following Monday, Osprey Tech's headquarters was receiving more subpoenas than sales calls. One of their clients, a shipping firm in Texas, had filed a federal inquiry claiming the software outage jeopardized interstate freight infrastructure. The Department of Commerce came knocking. They wanted proof of licensing across all modules. Osprey Tech couldn't provide it because they didn't own it, because they'd never read the agreement. And now? They were operating an unlicensed logistics engine tied to active military subcontractors. Oops. 5 more clients suspended contracts. 2 demanded refunds. One CEO reportedly told the board, "You sold us a Ferrari and forgot to mention the engine belonged to someone else." Then came the final blow. A shareholder lawsuit, class action, led by 3 VC firms and a pension fund. The claim? Willful misrepresentation, violation of intellectual property law, knowingly shipping a product in breach of contract. Osprey's valuation tanked. Their stock, what little remained of it in private markets, went from promising unicorn to radioactive asset. And me? I was sitting in my studio above the bookstore, misting my plants, each named after a programming language I no longer had to pretend to like. Ruby, Rust, Scala, Python. Java was thriving, like always, even when ignored. My phone buzzed. Another message. This one from a junior dev I used to mentor. No hello, no backstory, just, "They asked for your Git history." And below it, "Did you see this coming?" I smiled. Yes, I did. I didn't trigger it out of spite. I didn't sabotage anything. I just followed the rules they signed, and I remembered. Then I built something better.